What's up? Welcome to Spiritual Self-Defense. Thank you for showing up, everybody. Everybody who's here live, and then there's people watching online also. This is the weekly free lecture that I give. My name is Robert. I'm from Existence First. That's the name of my company. It's an existentialist mind coaching company. And what do I mean by mind coaching? It means that we enter the mind and we use mathematical thinking, physics, engineering to understand our thoughts and operate on them in such a way that we feel better and we suffer less. Okay. So let's get right into the lecture today. So this week I was thinking back to high school class. I had a class called graphics design, right? And we used Photoshop. We learned how to use Photoshop. And if anyone's familiar with Photoshop, it's been years since I've done it, but they take these images, right, and they split the images into layers, right? So let's say if the teacher told me to design this box, right, or like the graphic or whatever, like one layer might be this white canvas, right? A second layer might be like this maroon text, right? And then a third layer on top of that might be like this curve thing, right? Because if you want to change one, like let's say the text was fine, but then they wanted to change the shape. I don't know if you can get it on that camera too. Is it cool? All right. If you want to change like the curvature of this thing, right, logo, it's easier if it's in its own layer, right? Because then you're not altering the other layers. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So an image like this could have like 3 different layers to it. It could have, a canvas, some text, and then some sort of graphic, right? But when you look at it in two dimensions and the layers, you put them all together, then it looks like one image, where it's actually like 3 different layers just condensed into one. Okay? All right. So now let's take this and let's apply it to like life. Okay? Let's apply it to something you experience. So think about an event that you experienced recently or are currently experiencing that might be giving some sort of emotional tension to you, right? Some sort of like, maybe you can't decide what to do in the situation. Could be relationship related, could be career related, could be something that's like stressing you out. Okay. Now what I want you to do is think of that situation and start to pull it apart into various layers, right? Because human life is very rich. In every situation you encounter, there's different like layers to it. For example, there's one aspect to every situation that is strict logic and problem solving. Okay. For instance, when I was driving in Chicago, or living in Chicago, and I was driving down the highway one time, a semi-truck hit me on the side because it was trying to merge into my lane, right? And so I pulled over, the truck pulled over, right? My tire was like punctured, and the car was, it was slightly damaged, but it was repairable. But I was going 60 miles an hour when I was hit, right? And so this car accident, right? For some reason, I was just very calm during the whole thing. I pulled over, waited for police or whatever, right? And then we settled it, right? Now, because there's 2 different layers, at least 2 different layers, okay? One layer is the strictly logical layer of, okay, well now, what was I trying to accomplish? I was trying to get home from work, okay? What is the current condition of my car? Well, I have one tire that's flat now because it's punctured. If I can repair the wheel, I can drive it home, right? How do I repair the wheel? How do I get a new tire on here? Okay, well, I would need the roadside assistance people to come, which they did, right? They put the spare on, took the old tire off, put the spare on. The car was then drivable, right? It was just wheel damage, right? So, and then after that, who's going to pay for the repairs? I got to take it to an auto shop. The truck company's insurance will pay for it, right? You see all these logical things, right? strictly logical, right? That's one layer of this event. Then there is a whole other layer, an emotional like layer, right? Of the fight or flight response, which I did at the time. I didn't have much to this event, but in many situations we might have an emotional reaction, and we might start thinking like, we're not thinking, we might start feeling like really nervous, or right, or in shock. Oh my gosh, I just got into a car accident, right? But that's an emotional layer, and that's separate from the logical layer. Okay. Then there can even be maybe a third layer of like you and your relations to other people, right? Because I was on my way home, I was like, oh geez, like what if this accident was worse and like my parents never saw me again, right? Like that's like a really emotional uh, thought to have, right? But that's different from like that logical layer. It does nothing to help me get back home with a repaired tire. You know what I mean? So we got these different layers. Okay. So here's the mistake then, is when the mistake is when people take they take those layers and they start allowing those layers to fight against each other, or they almost as if they're in the same category, but they're separate. So here, what does that sound like? That sounds like when you hear people say, um, well, I know I would make more money in this new job, but I just I don't feel like it's right for me, or I'm afraid that blah blah blah, right? So there, the money thing is a logical reason, right? If you take the job, you will make more money. And then there's this whole emotional thing of like, oh, I just don't know if this is the right job for me. I don't know if this is me. It doesn't feel like me, or all this stuff, right? That's a different layer, right? And then we try to combine another example, relationships, right? You know, oh, I know that if I stay in this relationship, I'm never going to go anywhere in life. I'm just going to stay the same, but I love him or her, blah, 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 right? So then it's the layer, emotional layer, and logical layer. Logical layer is problem solving and trying to move forward in life, right? Emotional layer is your feelings, right? And it's not to say that one is invalid, right? Obviously, you feel the way you feel about certain things for a reason, because our bodies are biological systems, and our feelings are indications and feedback of the outside and what's going on, right? Same way as when you're hungry, that's like, oh, that's an indication of like blood sugar is low, go eat, right? To bring the level back up. So every feeling of fear, hopelessness, whatever, right, that needs to be seen as information rather than just sort of like mental tyranny or whatever. Okay. All right. That's the this idea of splitting the layers. Okay. I'll end this. I'm just gonna do a short recording and then we'll finish up everybody who's here live. But here's a question. Okay. What if? So we have these multiple layers to every life event. What if I told you that what you think of as life in your life experience is actually only the first three layers, right? The three layers that are closest to you, but there's another 97 layers behind that. Okay, so what if those other layers could be accessed? What if you could become aware of those? And what if those layers are affecting the first three layers in a way that obviously you wouldn't be aware of unless you were aware of those layers? Okay, for example, I have a new job at my day job place, right? And as I'm doing these tasks, I'm wondering, like, why is it that people always feel drained at the end of the day? Like when they go home at 5 p.m., they just feel like tired and drained, and right? And I said, well, what if this was being caused by some sort of prior expectation, like in the back of my mind, like 5 or 15 layers back, some sort of assumption that I learned early in childhood that says when you go to work, you will be tired after, or some sort of expectation. Because sometimes, I just went to this entrepreneur event, the 10X Growth Con, right? And sometimes doing some sort of job that you really enjoy actually gives you more energy rather than takes away energy. So that's an example of like, I would like to access these deeper layers, these farther back layers, right? And then by doing that, I would want to see how they're impacting the foremost layers, right? And how that's impacting my life. Okay, let's end the recording here, and we'll keep talking for those who are here live.